Let's take a look at the solution code for your lab activity.
This video is brought to you by OppiePies Academy.
So first we have the HTML file. The HTML file simply displays the form and then sends it to the PHP file to be saved. So I've got first some styling for my form. I set the width to 300 pixels, a padding of 4 pixels, and put a border around the form itself that was 2 pixels wide, solid, and black. I set a very light gray background color for the form. So the way the form should appear is just like this, right? We've got our text, we've got our background here, very, very simple. For the labels, we set the font family to Arial, font size about 80% of normal, and set the font weight to bold. And then for the inputs themselves, and that's where the user types their response, we used Arial and a slightly smaller font size of 0.7em. So here's where the interesting stuff happens. We have our form. Our form displays the labels first name, last name, and email. Put this up here so you can see it as we go. So here's the form that's created by this code. So we have our label, and then we have the actual text box where the user will type. Now, because I've used the label, we need an ID to match the label to the input. And then we need a name, so when it's passed to the server, we access via that name. So we've got both of those for the first name, last name, and email entries in our form. Now the form itself, the action is set to lab18.php, which is this file down here, which means that once submit is clicked, we're going to yield to this particular page, load it, and pass these values inside the input as key value pairs to the PHP page below. So either clicks on the form, Fred Smith, Fred at learn2program.tv. So now we pass to the lab18.php form. Oops, let's run that through localhost. That'll work a lot better. There we go. Fred Smith, Fred at learn2program.tv. So now page is passed to lab18.php. So now that that's passed, out of the superglobal array, we get the first name and set it to the variable first, the last name, set it to the variable last, and email and set it to the variable email. So we now have 3 values that came from that form. Now, in order to write it in a CSV form to the server, I need to save this as an array. So I created an array called data, and I created the array with the first name, last name, and email that have been passed to the PHP page. Now we create a file pointer with the file open command. The file pointer has 2 arguments, names.csv, and the second argument, which is the file mode. We're opening in append mode. The data actually gets written when this file put CSV command runs, getting the file pointer and the data we want to save, right? The data is this array we created in line 6. So we're saving the names.csv file in line 9, where we have the file pointer and the data, right? Where do we want to save it and what do we want to save? We output to the user that the data was written successfully, and then we close our file pointer. People frequently forget to do that. You want to make sure you always close your file pointer when you're done using it. So that actually saves the data. Now, in Lab 18A, now we're going to read the data in from the disk. In this file, I've actually mixed HTML and PHP. So note that we have our doc type and our HTML basic document structure. However, I start the PHP here on line 7. This is a common form, and you'll see this a lot, and this is probably a better way than just having PHP by itself. Sometimes, too, you'll have static content within your page and PHP content, so you'll see this type of thing. Now, be aware, even though this is mixed, you're going to save this as a .php file. All right, so here, first thing we do is again create the file pointer to names.csv, but this time we're opening in R or read mode, read only. So this doesn't have permission to write. Now we've got to loop through all the lines in the CSV. So when we loop through, what we're going to do is we're going to create a while loop, and we're going to say while we are not at end of file. That's what this stands for, end of file. So while we're not at end of file in the file pointer, we're going to run through a line at a time. So as we run through the file, the line is populated by fgetcsvfp. So this will put a line at a time inside the file. Now each line has 3 pieces of data: the first name, last name, and email address. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a quick loop here that says, okay, while x is less than 3, we're going to print line sub x. So line comes in as an array of values. We loop through the values, first name, last name, and email address, and then we print the value and a space, and we increment x to go to the next element. Once we've printed out all 3 values, we print a break, and we move back to the conditional statement, and we see if we're at the end of the file. If we're not, we go ahead and read in the next line with fgetcsvfp. So read in the next line, and we loop through the data in that line. So in this case, Donald Lassoff, and then the email address, all the way till we get to the end of the file, in which case this would be false, and we stop looping. We then again close the file, and at that point, all the results are written to the screen. So if we do lab18a.php, there are all of the names and email addresses in our file. Kind of challenging, but also a good opportunity to use the PHP documentation, which is quite good, to try and solve the problem. Hope you did well, and we'll see you in the next chapter, where we're going to start working on databases.